Hi there, and welcome to this lesson. Now, in this lesson, we'll be learning about basic arithmetic, okay? And on the basic arithmetic, we'll be learning decimals. Okay, so at this point, I'd remind you to set the video to play in 1080p HD. You can do so via the settings icon on the bottom right of the screen, all right? And as the lesson progresses, if you have any issues at all, or if anything comes off as unclear, please feel free to get in touch, okay? You can do so via the course dashboard. Okay, so let's jump right into the lesson. So decimals. Now, what are decimals? I think a few of us should be familiar with what decimals are. I think you might have encountered decimals, basically. But then you might have come across decimals. Decimals. What are decimals? A decimal is a number greater than 0, okay, but then less than 1, okay. And just like fractions, decimals represent a part of a whole. And basically, you could have a decimal like this. This is a decimal, all right. We have 0.184. This is a decimal, and basically, I'm going to talk you through some important features, some very important properties of decimals. Now, at the moment, we have three numbers after the decimal point. Okay, we have 0, then decimal point, and we have three numbers after the decimal point. Now we have three decimal places. Okay, it's what we call 3DPs. All right, and basically, I'm going to tell you what each of these places represents. Just like we have place value for regular whole numbers, i.e. units, tens, hundred, thousand, tens of thousands, millions, and so on. We have place values for decimal numbers as well. So the way the decimal system works is, as you go from the decimal point toward the right, you start with this, and this is called a tenth. Okay, there's a h at the end. All right, there's a th, so we have 10 and a th, so it's a tenth. And then the next one is a hundredth. All right, so just like 100, but then you have th at the end. And then right after that you have, I think you might have guessed it, thousand. All right, so you have thousand with a th. So that's a bit about decimals, and here are some examples of decimals. We have some common decimals. We have 0.5. 0.5 is the same as 1 over 2. Okay, like I told you, decimals are just like fractions. You can actually convert between fractions and decimals. Okay, 0.25 is 1 over 4. So basically you have 0.25 as a fourth of 1. Okay, and then you have 0.75, 2.75, and just like we have mixed fractions, you can have decimals and whole numbers. Okay, because 2.75 is a whole number 2 and a decimal is 0.75 together, so you have 2.75. You can have 12.125, 40.005. And if you notice something, as I've been pronouncing the decimals, for example, I said 12.125. You don't say 12.125, you say 12.125. You actually say the numbers individually. Just something you should know about decimals. So what are we going to be doing in this lesson? What are we going to be learning? Now, we're going to learn to convert fractions to decimals. We'll learn to convert decimals to fractions. We'll learn to add decimals. We'll learn to subtract decimals, multiply decimals, and finally we'll learn to divide with decimals. Okay, so let's jump right into that, and we'll be doing that using examples. So example 1, and example 1 says convert 1 over 8 to a decimal. Now, how would you go about doing this? Okay, I'm going to show you how to do this using a few short steps. All right, so step 1. Now, the first thing we want to do is we're going to attempt to divide 1 by 8. But obviously, we can't divide 1 by 8. It's impossible because 1 is actually less than 8. Okay, so because we have 1 over 8, it actually implies 1 divided by 8. But then, can we actually divide 1 by 8? No, we can't. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to multiply that numerator by 10 up until the point where it becomes divisible by 8. Okay, so we'll multiply the numerator 1 by 10, it becomes 10. Can we divide 10 with 8? No, we can't. We can't divide 10 with 8, because if you divide 10 with 8, you would have 1 remainder 2. We need a perfect system here. Okay, now let's multiply by another 10, and basically we have 100. Okay, so 100 divided by 8. Can we divide 100 by 8? No, we can't divide 100 by 8, because if you divide 100 by 8, you would have a remainder. Okay, so let's multiply by 10 again. And if you multiply by 10, you have 1000 divided by 8. And yes, you can divide 1000 by 8. Okay, so we've established that we're multiplying the numerator by 1000, i.e. 3 tens. Okay, now 3 tens represent 3 decimal places. Now, I just want you to keep this at the back of your mind for now. All right, now the next thing we're going to do, step 2, is we have 1 over 8, and we'll multiply that by 1000 over 1, and basically what we have is 1000 divided by 8. Okay, and when you solve that out, you have 1000 divided by 8, it will give you 125. Okay, so we've gotten to this point. Now there's something you need to do here. If you go back to step 1, remember we said 3 decimal places. What that meant is our answer in the end would have 3 decimal places. So at the moment we have 125, and we're going to express 125 as a number with 3 decimal places. We're going to introduce a decimal point, all right, and our resulting decimal would have 3 decimal places. Now here's how we do it. So we have step 4, and we'll write the number 125 down. Okay, and from the right, we're going to be moving to the left. So from the right, we have 1, 2, 3, and our decimal point will fall there. Okay, and now we'll write our final decimal, step 5. Okay, our answer in this case is 0.125, or you basically just put a 0 before the point and you have 0.125, and that is how you convert a fraction to a decimal. Now example 2, and example 2 says convert 0.375 to a fraction. Okay, so we're going the other way around this time, and we're converting from a decimal 0.375 to a fraction. Okay, and it's actually fairly easy, really easy, to be honest. And then we have step 1. Now if we want to convert this to a fraction, the first thing we need to do is we need to know how many decimal places are involved here. Okay, so we have 0.375, and I'll tell you that we have 3 decimal places here. Okay, now 3 decimal places, just like we did from the last question, 3 decimal places imply that we're going to be multiplying by 1000. Okay, remember we had 1000 and 3 decimal places. This time we're going to reverse. We have 3 decimal places. This implies we're going to be multiplying by 1000. Okay, and I'm going to show you exactly what we do here. So step 2, now we have 0.375, all right, and we're going to multiply this by 1000. Okay, 0.375, we're going to multiply this by, we're going to assume 0.375 over 1. Okay, 0.3, because 0.375 is 0.375 over 1. Any number in itself written as a fraction is that number over 1, and when we multiply that out, we would have 0.375 multiplying 1000 to give us 375. Okay, and then we have the denominator as 1000. So 0.375 is 375 divided by 1000. Now the next thing we want to do is we have 375 divided by 1000, and this is a fraction. This is your answer, to be honest, but then you actually need to break this down. All right, you need to divide by 5. Basically, I think you're familiar with this from the lessons on fractions. So when we divide this down, we'd have a final answer as 3 over 8. Okay, so 0.375 expressed as a fraction is 3 over 8. Okay, let's move on. Example 3. And example 3 says evaluate 2.3217 plus 40.14. Okay, so now we want to add decimals, and adding decimals also fairly easy. Okay, step 1. I think we actually just have one step, to be honest. So we have 2.3217 and 40.14. Now when you're adding decimals, there's just one very important rule. The decimal points have to align. Okay, they need to be on the same line. You don't write the numbers out following the way the numbers are arranged. You basically, the most important things is that the decimal point are on the same, are aligned basically. Okay, and then just like you add pretty much any number, you can go ahead and add 2.3217 plus 40.147, and basically anywhere there isn't a number, basically, for example, there isn't a number under 1, there isn't a number under 7, and there isn't a number above 4 on the other end, on the left end, you basically just assume we have zeros there. Okay, and when you add this like you would any number, you will end up with an answer 42.4617. And that is how you add. You basically just bring that out, 42.4617, and that is how you add decimals. Very simple, very straightforward. Let's move into the next example. Example 4. Okay, example 4 says evaluate 32.12 minus 7.427. Okay, and subtracting, now we're subtracting decimals, and subtracting decimals actually very similar to adding decimals. You basically follow the same simple rule. Okay, and just ensure that the decimal points are aligned. Okay, that's pretty much it. Once the decimal points are aligned, you can pretty much just subtract or add them like you would a regular number. Okay, and remember that any area where you don't see a number, where you feel a number should be, you pretty much just put a 0 there. Okay, and when you subtract this, just like you would any regular number, you would have 24.693. Okay, I'll bring that out. Final answer 24.693. These are actually fairly easy. Okay, so let's move on to the next example. Example 5. And example 5 says evaluate 0.0025 multiplied by 0.04. Now we're multiplying decimals. Okay, also fairly easy. Step 1. Now the first thing we want to do here is we want to know the total number of decimal places we have. Okay, there's just one trick, one thing you have to do first. Now in 0.025 we have 4 decimal places, and in 0.04 we have 2 decimal places. So in total, for the two numbers, we have 6 decimal places in all. Now there's just one rule when you multiply in decimals. Because you have 6 decimal places from the two numbers, your final answer must have 6 decimal places. Okay, your final answer would work with 6 decimal places. All right, and here's how you go about it. So once you've established that you have 6 decimal places, step 2, you basically just extract the numbers. All right, and basically just forget about the decimal point for a second, and you have 0.0025. What you have is 25, and 0.04, what you have is 4. So what we actually have there is 25 times 4, and when you multiply 25 by 4, you have 100. Okay, so we've actually done the multiplication. Now we need to introduce our decimal point, and remember, like I said, the final answer must have 6 decimal places. Okay, so step 3, I'm going to write down 100, and from the right I'm going to count 6 decimal places. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and that's where my decimal points will go. Now you see there are some missing areas right in front of the 1, okay, just before the 1, and what do you think we can do there? Okay, from everything I've been talking about, telling you about decimals, we can introduce zeros. Okay, so we put in zeros there, and then we have our final answer as 0.000100. Okay, and something you need to know, those zeros right after the one don't really count. Okay, so because you can, like I said, just in the same way we've been putting zeros for decimals where we didn't have numbers, where we have zeros after a number. Okay, the zeros before the one count, but the zeros right after the one, they do not count. Okay, so we can have our final answer as 0.0001. Okay, and that is how you multiply decimals. Okay, so let's move on. Now, example 6, I believe this should be example 6, and basically we've been asked to evaluate 0.49 divided by 0.007. Okay, so we're dividing decimals now. Now, how do we go about solving this? Okay, let's jump right into it. So the first thing we want to do here is we want to write this out as a fraction. Okay, we want to write this in fraction form. So we can write this as 0.49 over 0.007. Okay, so 0.49 divided by 0.007. Okay, so now the next thing we want to do is I actually want to express this as numbers. I want to write this out as numbers. Okay, so I don't want to have decimals involved anymore. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply till I get to the point where I have no numbers. Okay, so what you basically do is you pick the decimal with a higher decimal place. Okay, and in this case we have 0.007 as a higher decimal place, so the higher decimal place here is three decimal decimal places, and basically right after that we go 0.49. okay, because we're dealing with three decimal places, three, that's 3 tens. Okay, just think of it as 3 tens. We're going to multiply it by 10 times 10 times 10, that's 1,000. Okay, so I'll multiply the numerator by 1,000 and I'll multiply the denominator by 1,000. Okay, and when I do that I get 490 divided by 7. Now if you notice, what I've simply achieved here is I've eliminated the decimal place. Okay, remember when you're multiplying fractions, just the same way you can divide the numerator by 2, divide the denominator by 2, and the fraction remains the same, you can actually multiply the numerator by 2 and multiply the denominator by 2 and the fraction stays the same. Or when you have a fraction 0.49 divided by 0.007, okay, you can actually multiply the numerator by 1,000, multiply the denominator by 1,000, and the fraction stays the same. Okay, and then now it's pretty much just working that out, and we have 490 over 7, 490 divided by 7, and you have an answer 70. Isn't it interesting that we divided two decimals and we got our final answer is a whole number, 70? Yeah, it happens sometimes. Okay, so that's pretty much all you need to know about decimals. Okay, so we've learned to convert fractions to decimals, and we learned to convert decimals to fractions. We learned to add decimals, subtract decimals, multiply decimals, and finally we've learned to divide decimals. All right, bye for now.